Let's take a look at WordPress 6.9 that dropped earlier this week. I'm going to go through the key things that I think are the most interesting, but I would recommend checking out the release notes so you can see all the new features, updates, tweaks, and amendments. I'll put a link to that in the description and anything else I cover in this particular video. So let's start with what I would consider to be one of the more useful features in WordPress itself, and that is the quick command palette. Previously, you could only open this up in certain sections like your posts, your pages, and so on. Now you can open it anyway. Just use the Control or Command key and K, and that will open it up. You can start typing, and you'll see that will pull up all the different things that are matching what we're searching for. In this example, settings, and as you can see, it's not being restricted to WordPress settings, it's settings for plugins, all those kinds of good things are available. So if I want the Flowmatic settings, for example, I can go down, hit Enter or Return, and jump into the settings for that. I can do the same again, Control or Command K, do something else, like pages, and we can see we've got pages, all pages, add a page, and so on. So let's go to pages, and there's all of our pages. So that is a super useful little feature that is now available pretty much anywhere inside WordPress dashboard itself. Let's kick things off now with taking a look at some of the new options inside the editor itself. So for example, we have the gallery. So if we do a search for gallery and add a gallery in, choose our media library and add some images, create our gallery and insert it. Looks like a standard gallery and nothing different there. However, there are some changes here. Let's select the parent itself, the gallery, and you'll notice now we have an aspect ratio option. We can now choose from popular aspect ratios like 16:9, square, 4:3, and so on. So you can optimize this to get exactly what you want for the particular kind of images you are displaying. For example, we may want to have something like 16:9. You can see that gives us our 16:9. Adjust our columns and so on. So it's nice to have the ability to be able to customize the aspect ratio of the images that we want to use. It's much nicer than just having everything as a square. Now let's move on to another feature that, in my opinion, is probably a little less useful, and that's the ability to have notes on any of our blocks. So we have this gallery block. With the gallery block selected, we can come over to the three dots and we can choose to add a note. And you can see there's our note. And we can easily add whatever note we want in. Click on Add Note, and that's now been applied to that particular block. And you can see we can answer this. If you've got multiple people kind of working inside the actual website itself, you can leave notes for them. So I can imagine if you're working in a collaborative environment, maybe multiple people working on particular posts, pages, and so on, having the notes inside you could be really useful. But for a lot of users, if you're just working on your own, unless you want to leave yourself a little prompt, probably not going to get much use out of it. There are some other options though. You'll see now we have some notes enabled. We have a new icon at the top that allows us to show all the notes, or we can hide them and we can just go back and forth between them should we want to. We can also use the option to resolve this by clicking on it, and we've got the three dots, which gives us the ability to edit or delete this. So as I say, your mileage will probably vary depending upon how you actually use WordPress itself. Another little feature that is probably useful if you are designing sites, especially when a page gets more complicated, is the ability to show and hide various different elements or different blocks. I use this a lot in Bricks Builder when I'm creating things and I want to see what hero section works better and I don't want to have multiple different ones. You could use this the same. To access this, you simply come to the block that you want, click the three dots, come down to the option that says Hide, and that will hide it inside the actual preview itself. You can see it's still available inside the list view, and we can enable this again by simply coming back in and saying show. Simple as that. Again, a useful little feature, not groundbreaking, but a nice to have inside the editor. Now, speaking of useful little features inside the editor, we now have the ability to drag and drop things around. So for example, maybe I want to change the order of these images. Well, I can simply grab the one I want, position it where I want to, and you'll see it'll reorder. Quite useful. Now, you're not restricted to doing this just inside the gallery. You can add other blocks in. Let's go and add something in like a image. We'll choose media library and we'll add an image from here. And now you see we get the hand option, so we can easily drag this around and position it where we want. You'll also notice that we can also drag this into our gallery, which is quite a nifty little feature. Let's move that back out. Make it on its own. There we go. So that's quite a nice little feature you have there. However, it doesn't work in my experience on everything. For example, if we add something like a paragraph in, we'll pop some text inside there, and you'll notice that we don't get the hand option here. So we can't actually do it. We go over image, we can do it. Over this image, we can do it. Over the actual text block, we can't do it. We add a heading in, you'll see the same thing applies here. So it's not on everything, which kind of makes it a little bit weird. Again, this is one of those weird little areas. If you are a UI UX designer, you kind of think you want to have consistency. If you can drag and drop things, why can't we drag and drop every single block inside the editor? Unless I'm missing something, which I absolutely could do, this is not my main place to work. If I am wrong, please do let me know in the comment section down below. Now, if you'd like to be kept up to date more about what's happening with WordPress, WPTuts, and so on, why not join the WPTuts community? You can head over to the link in the description down below, join up to over 1,000 current members, and take advantage of a vibrant community, ask questions, get involved, access free courses, and a lot more. Link in the description down below. Anyway, let's get back on with this video. Okay, let's move on now to another feature that's enabled. So if we come in and we add in a group, and we'll just choose a group. It doesn't really matter too much what I want to do here. I want to come down to the advanced section, and you'll see there's a new feature called Manage Allowed Blocks. We open this, you can see there's all the blocks we have available inside the editor, and we can choose what we do and don't want to allow. So for example, we don't want widgets, we don't want theme options, embeds, Fluent Cart, and MailerPress. We simply want to have a really simple setup that allows some of the design options. So for example, we may not want to have page breaks, and we're going to say we don't want to have all media, so we'll disable that so you can have images, gallery, and video, nothing more than that, and click apply. So now inside here, if we want to add things in, we have a restricted set of options. So for example, we don't have embeds apart from video. So you can see we can streamline this. Now, obviously, this is probably more useful if you're using it inside a template as opposed to using it inside a page or a post where it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Unless, again, I'm missing something. I would love to sort of see some more logic actually being used here, because if this is just a normal page, which it currently is, what's the benefit of having the allowed blocks? If it's a template, makes absolute sense. If it doesn't make sense in this context, maybe take that out of the interface. Again, I could be missing something right in front of my face why you would want to use this, but my brain just basically says, I don't see the point in having that inside posts and pages when if I don't want to use a particular block, I don't have to use it. Removing it and blocking it from there makes no sense. Templates, yes. Anyway, let me know if I'm getting this wrong. Next up, let's take a look at the accordion. So let's open this and add an accordion in. And you'll see now if we expand this from the left, we've got our basic sort of setup template. Now, if you've ever used anything like, Elementor or Bricks or anything like that, you'll see this is very, very familiar. What you do is you start off with like a really simple setup that has the basic component pieces. So the accordion title, the heading, the panel, which contains the content and so on. So for example, let's change this from accordion title. We'll call this section 1, expand this, and we'll come to our paragraph. We'll paste in some text. And there we go. We've now created an accordion item. So now what we can do is we can duplicate this. We now have a second one. We can make our changes here. So we'll just change the heading to accordion 2. And we now have an accordion. Simple as that. You see both sections are closed, and we can control aspects of this. So we choose the accordion. You can see we've got options here for the layout, auto close these, show an icon, the position of the icon, and so on. And of course, we've got styling options here as well. So you may want to change the background color of this to this horrible yellow, and your text will set to be black, for example. And you can add spacing and padding and so on around things. So there's options there, and obviously margins and so on. And your block spacing, should you want to space things out a little bit more. And if we click to expand these, you can see it expands and opens up. One of the things that I think is missing here, and again, please do correct me if I'm wrong on any of these things. I'm not going to keep saying this, just do in the comment section if I'm wrong. Is that it all just looks a little bit sort of click and bang, it's there. There's no polish added to it. The things like just having an option that says how you want to have this open. Do you want it to fade in? Do you want it to scroll down? Or do you want nothing on there? Just give us a little bit more control over how this looks to make it look a little bit more polished without us having to actually go in and do that maybe manually. So there's no options that I've seen inside here that allows us to do that. Typography and so on. We've got appearance and so on, but that's all just to do with the typography. Borders and shadows, but nothing really to allow us to control those aspects. One useful little feature that has been added in, though, is the terms option. So now we can create terms query loops and have term descriptions and so on. So think of things like your tags, your categories and so on that you create to organize your content, like your posts and so on. We can now create our kind of repeating query loops there, which I think is quite useful. So let's just do a query. You can see there's our terms query. So we'll choose that option for the list. You can see you've got name and count. I'm going to choose name from here. And like we just seen with the accordion, you can see what this basically does is it creates a basic template for us. This is a loop. So if we take a look by choosing the terms query, you can see we can choose whether it's category, tags, categories, brands, and so on, depending upon what you have. And you'll see that because you've got brands and so on, I've got Fluent Cart installed, the free version. So it's picking those up. It's not limited and restricted to specifically just native WordPress functions. It will support those custom taxonomies and so on. So for example, if I choose categories from here, you'll see this pulls up men's shoes. If I choose brands, I'm not sure if I've got any brands here, there's nothing found. So you can see how we could use this. We'll choose the normal WordPress categories, and you'll see this just shows us the one. So what we can do is we say show empty terms because I've got a couple that don't have any posts associated with them. So there's one part of it. But now let's just say we want to pull in the description to make this a little bit more intuitive. Like we've got two categories here. What does the second category actually refer to? So what we do is when we use this template, we're simply going to come in and say under here we're going to add after, and we're going to simply type in term, and we want term description. And you see that pulls in the description. So again, we've got control then over our typography, so we might want to make that smaller. And if we save that, now we've got links through to the relevant posts inside these particular categories, and we've got a description underneath of what those categories actually refer to. So if you're creating more dynamic websites with lots of content and you want to have a nice way of showing all the different categories, tags, and so on, giving some information about it, and then allowing people to click through to it, this is a nice simple way of doing it. So I do appreciate where we've got these more dynamic related features being added in to create those templates and structures. Now, another useful block that we've got added in is the time to read. So if we do a search for time, you can see there's our time to read. We can add that in, and it tells us roughly how long a particular post is going to take. It makes no sense in this particular context, but you see how easy it is to add that in. And you can see we've got display range, and we can choose some basic info like the time and the number of words and so on. So you could easily add this in by putting the number of words and the time it would take to read as part of a blog post or a news post or an article, to give people an idea. It's never going to be 100% bang on, but it's nice to have that option here. Now, speaking of new blocks, we also have a new maths block, or if you're American, math block. So if we just do a search inside here, which is for math, you can see that allows us to create a math block. So you can put your different math calculations and so on inside there and have those displayed inside your post content, whatever it is. Useful in some cases. For me, I don't think I have much use for this ever, but it's there should you want it. We also have some new options when it comes to the comments side of things. We do a search for comment. We have the new comments count, and we have comments link. This allows you to separate that information and only use what is relevant. Again, these are more kind of geared towards creating templates for your overall site structure if you allow comments and you want a little bit more granular control over how and what is being displayed inside those templates. So again, all useful things. If you are into full site editing and you want to create your own templates, the more options we have like this, the more options we have when it comes to creating those templates. That means there's a lot less hand coding going on and modifying and adding extra plugins and so on into it. So native support and functionality for these kinds of things, in my opinion, is incredibly useful if you have a need for these types of things. Now let's talk about what I would consider to be probably a little less useful and a bit more, in my opinion, gimmicky. And that's well, let me just show you. If we do a search for stretchy, we have stretchy paragraph and stretchy heading. It's basically a block that will look at the content inside it and grow or shrink depending upon what you put in there. So for example, as you can see, as I'm typing, it gets smaller to contain the text and keep it on one line. If I start to remove those, you can see the text gets larger and it stays inside that bounding box. The same thing goes if you're using the sort of other option here. If we come down underneath and we do stretchy, which is the stretchy paragraph. It's going to do the same thing. It's just in a paragraph of text as opposed to being a title. Again, I don't really know if this is more useful or gimmicky, but you let me know in the comment section down below. Can you ever see yourself using this? Have you been holding out for something like this in your designs for the last God knows how long? Let me know down below. One final thing before we wrap this one up, and that's the cover block. So if we do cover, and we'll choose an image from our media library, this one will do. We'll select it. We'll set this to be full width. And as you can see, we don't really have much control now over the size of this. We can adjust content width and height, but it's not necessarily what we want to do. However, if we come over into the options here, you'll see we now have the same option for our aspect ratio. So we can choose this, say 16:9, for example, and it now compensates. And you can put a minimum height inside here should you want to. And you can use pixels, percentage, ems, and so on. So all the key values are available here. So those are the key new changes inside WordPress 6.9. Now I'd love to know what you think of these. Is there anything in this release that you think, I'm stoked about this, I'm really happy that that's been added in? Or do you kind of look at it and think, it's okay, there's nothing really interesting me. I'm going to carry on my day job using Bricks, Elementor, whatever tools you use. Let me know down in the comment section down below. As always, all applicable links are also in that description. My name is Paul C. This is WPTuts, and until next time, take care.